Hi friends, Robin here from Cheese from Scratch, and I have been making so much cheese lately. I currently have 2 cows and milk, which means that I am almost constantly making cheese, or at least daily making cheese. You can actually see in the background that I have 2 cheese pots on the stove. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you a few of my naturally aged cheeses that are in the cheese cave. We're also going to be looking at some cheeses that are ready to move on to aging, and it's going to be kind of a how do I take care of my cheeses apart from making them? What does that look like on those days when I have to care for those cheeses, and how do I assess what they need to really help myself make better cheese? So depending on what cheeses I have in the cheese cave, I'm usually pulling them out every couple days just to look at them and see if they need anything. I currently have a couple cheeses, a couple gyres that, I don't know if that's how you say it, but gyres in the cheese cave that I'm having to wash every couple days. So that's really kind of solidifying that I have to be looking at my cheeses every 2 days kind of thing. But I do like to, if I have cheeses in these ripening boxes, and I've done a video on how to set up a ripening box, but if I have cheeses in a ripening box, I do like to check on them, at least every 2 days, if not flipping them every day, depending on how old they are and what they're doing. So in today's check of these cheeses, I've got a couple Goudas. These ones that are open here, these boxes that are open, are Gouda cheeses that I made last week. They are actually just drying and they're ready to go on to vacuum sealing, and all of this, how to do this, is in this, in that ripening container video that I will link down below. But these cheeses have been drying for about a week. They are dry to the touch and they're ready to go on to vacuum sealing is the choice that I'm going to choose for these cheeses. But I actually noticed on the dill Gouda that is closest to us here that there was a little bit of mold growth, and so I just wanted to clean that up before I vacuum sealed it. So when I clean up a little bit of mold growth just before I vacuum seal a cheese, I do what is called spot washing. So I'm going to take about a 1/4 cup of white vinegar and mix it with a teaspoon of salt, and I just take a lint-free cloth and I just rub that mold off. And I'm not washing the whole cheese by any means. I'm just kind of spot cleaning any spot, kind of little spots that I see where there is some mold growth. So there really wasn't too much on this cheese. It actually just got too much humidity. So the lid of the box had kind of rested on it too much. I kind of like to keep the lid a little bit ajar, but because I have so many boxes in the cheese cave right now, it had kind of got, the lid had got sealed onto it. And so that just raised the humidity in the box and it made it grow a little bit of cat fur mold. And so I just had to wipe that off. So once I get it all cleaned up, I'm ready to go on to vacuum seal these cheeses. I only vacuum seal them when they are actually dry. So there is a easy test that you can use for this, where you take a piece of paper towel, you put your cheese onto the paper towel, and when you pick it up, the paper towel should be dry. It should not be wet at all. And so that's how you know that your cheese is dry enough to go on to vacuum sealing. And this is an important piece when you're vacuum sealing cheeses, because you don't want to seal them up when they still are drying, because that's going to lock moisture in and it's going to create a really bitter cheese for you. So best to make sure that they are fully dry. So these cheeses, because they've been drying for about a week in the cheese cave, they are fully dry and they are ready to go on to vacuum sealing. Once I vacuum seal, I just label everything that I did with that cheese onto the cheese itself. So this is a dill Gouda that I sealed on a certain day. I think I sealed it on like May 24th. I also like to write what kind of culture I use, so I clabber cultured both of these Goudas, so I'm going to write clabber culture on there. I like to write any specifics from the make. So these cheeses were actually twins. They were made in the same pot, and I just pressed them in different forms. You can see one's a Gouda that is plain, and one is a Gouda that is dill. So I'm just kind of putting a lot number on there so that I know that they both are twins. They came out of the same batch. I also am writing a little bit of the differences in them. So for example, one of these I surface salted and one of them I brine salted. So I'm going to put that note on there. So just anything important that you want to kind of remember about your cheese. And I really find that this is helpful versus having a notebook, because one, I'm not very good about, keeping a notebook in one spot and then remembering to look back at it. And it also gets kind of confusing when you're making so much cheese, which cheeses are which. I mean, you can correlate it to lot numbers and things like that, but it's easier for me to fit it into my lifestyle and know what happened with that cheese to just write it on the cheese itself. And so this is obviously something that is not as easy when you are naturally aging a cheese, but just having that option with vacuum sealing to write it right on the cheese is kind of helpful. Now this Gouda, it didn't get turned as much as its kind of sister or its twin here, and you can see that it's not quite dry on the bottom, but I really need this ripening container, so I am taking a chance and I'm going to seal it, and I'm going to write that note onto the cheese itself that, hey, it was a little bit moist on the bottom of it. I sealed it anyways, and we're going to see if that has an impact on the final cheese itself. It was dry enough that I didn't think that it was actually going to have an impact. I was like, I think it will be fine. I'll watch it. I'll just make sure there's no moisture in the bag, but really, I didn't think it was going to impact it too much. So again, I'm just writing the notes on this cheese onto the vacuum seal bag itself. And now these cheeses are going to go back into my Cheesecave, which runs at about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm just going to flip them about once a week. I really actually honestly don't do that. But the recommendation is if you are vacuum sealing cheeses, just flip them once a week. When you vacuum seal cheeses, you don't have to worry about controlling humidity, which is super helpful when you don't want to have to kind of fiddle with cheeses. So if you are just trying to fit a little bit of cheese making into your life and you don't have time to really deal with a bunch of aging techniques of it, vacuum sealing is amazing. So on to checking onto some of my other cheeses. I also have these provolones. This was provolone out of one big batch that I made about 5 days ago. They are currently drying in the Cheesecave. You can see one side is drier than the other. These are also sister cheeses. They were one big block that I cut in half before drying. Usually if you're going to cut a block of cheese in half before aging, like if it's not going to fit in your vacuum seal bag or something, I do recommend cutting it in half before you dry, because that's just going to allow that cut line to actually be able to dry the same as the rest of the cheese. Now I try not to do this. I try to fit everything into my vacuum seal bags or naturally age something that won't fit, but that's not always possible, so that's just a little tip for you. So these cheeses aren't quite dry, just flip them. I try to flip them daily when they're drying, and so they're going to go back into the Cheesecave as well, just in those little ripening containers where you can find that video down below on how to set those up. Now this is my Cheesecave. It's just a refrigerator fitted with a thermostat, an Inkbird thermostat that controls the humidity at 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I have no humidity control in this fridge, and those little containers that I use, they control the humidity for me. So for cheeses that need humidity control, that is how I utilize that. You can see my cheese fridge is getting quite full. I have to kind of reorganize it and make sure that the bottom cheeses don't get too squished, so I should do that soon. Now I'm going to go on to taking care of my Gruyere cheeses. So actually, these cheeses are super interesting. I have never made Gruyere cheese before in my life, and so this first cheese, this first Gruyere, I made using a Gruyere recipe, and I followed it pretty closely, although I use Clabber as a culture because I love Clabber. I use it for everything now. So I use Clabber as a culture for this cheese that I'm showing you here. And so this cheese is about a month old. I've been washing it with a light salt brine every 2 days, or 2 days about. So a light salt brine is just about a cup of water and 1 teaspoon of salt. And I just use a lint-free cloth, and I just wash the whole surface of the cheese. And this is keeping any other molds at bay. And it's also creating this salty environment where a type of bacteria called B. linens can kind of grow and kind of thrive on the rind of this cheese. So this cheese is coming along really nicely. I'm super excited about it. But one note that I kind of made to myself while I was making this Gruyere cheese is that, man, this recipe is so similar to my Alpine recipe. And so I decided that I was going to take one of my Alpine cheeses and naturally age it using the same technique as this Gruyere. And at the end, I'm going to be able to see really, are these cheeses very similar? Now, here, when I was washing this cheese, I noticed that the humidity was a little bit too low. I want it to be about 85% in this ripening container, but I think the lid got kind of more ajar than I would have liked. And the consequence of this was that I found a small crack in the rind of my cheese. So it started to dry out too much and it cracked the rind a tiniest little bit. So I'm kind of mad at myself because I've been looking after this cheese like a baby, and it has this little crack in the rind now. So I'm just gonna have to watch it. Hopefully that doesn't affect it too much, but that is my fault for letting the humidity go too low in that ripening container. So my priority for this cheese is to raise the humidity up in that ripening container. Just the act of washing it and putting this moisture onto the cheese will probably raise it up enough if I put the lid pretty much fully onto the container, but I also decided to put a wet crumpled up piece of paper towel into the box too, just to raise that initial humidity up, and then I'll pull that paper towel out shortly, or not too much far after I put it in. And so this will just raise that humidity up for that individual cheese. And that's one of the reasons I love these ripening containers, is because you can really take care of one individual cheese. You know, there's all sorts of different ways that people control humidity in their cheese caves. You know, they can have humidifiers, they can have wine fridges that you can set the humidity to a certain specific, but really nothing beats what I have found. Actually, okay, I do not have the experience with humidifiers or wine fridges to really speak to it, but what I have found from my own just experiments and techniques is that using these ripening containers is really effective in creating environments for your individual cheeses. The biggest problem with it is having enough space in your aging area to store these containers. So, for example, I had to wrap up that little Gouda that was maybe not quite dry enough. Like, it could have used another day in the aging environment, but I just didn't have the room to keep it in there. So yeah, that's kind of the downside of it, but I really do love these ripening containers. All right, so now I'm washing my Alpine style cheese. This cheese is about, I would say, a week or two behind the other Gruyere cheese. Now, there is an order that I do when I wash. I always wash the first one first, and then I wash the second one second. And this cheese is progressing way faster than my initial Gruyere. So the reason for that is that I'm actually kind of inoculating the rind with the same bacterias and yeasts and fungus that are on the initial Gruyere. I'm doing the same thing for this Alpine one. And so I'm actually probably going to start another one here in a little bit and just kind of keep that rind inoculation going on, washing the oldest cheese first and going to the newest cheese. And I'm excited to kind of experiment with that. I do make a new light salt brine every single time I wash cheese. Some people don't do that, but it is recommended. There's there's risk of contamination and stuff if you don't. I don't know. I don't know much. I don't know much about that, I guess I should say. So yeah, but anyways, I'm just making a new light salt brine. So I just make it like a half batch. So I only make like maybe half a cup of salt brine, and sometimes even a quarter cup of salt brine, just to wash these little cheeses, because I'm having to remake it every 2 days. But it's really a small amount of salt. So anyways, that is my little cheese making tour of the cheeses that I have in the cave aging for now. All of these different cheeses, aside from the Gruyere cheese, all of these different cheeses that you've seen are in my upcoming physical cheese making book, Cheese from Scratch, Natural Cheese Making from Home. The book prints this week. It's going to print on May 31st. I can't even believe it's here already. This has been a 2-year project, so it has been sitting at the printer for a couple months now, but they finally have a printing date, and so May 31st it's printing, and then it's going to ship to pre-orders shortly after that. And you also get pre-order bonuses if you pre-order, so you can get a digital copy right away, so you can start making these cheeses. You can check out that link down below. But I'll see you guys next week. If you haven't already, like and subscribe, and come back next week, because I post a new video every Monday, and I would love to have you back. Okay, bye!